So my background is that I used to work in the travel industry as a travel consultant, and my son was born with cerebral palsy. And we have always liked to travel. My parents took me traveling when I was quite young, and so I have a sort of an ingrained love of travel. So we traveled for 6 months around the world when it was not the done thing to leave your job and take your family traveling because I'm older, and people weren't doing that back then. So I started to have wheelchair will travel when we came back from that trip because it just seemed like when we were researching our own trip, sorry, when we traveled with our son, it seemed like there was a big void in information about traveling with somebody who lives with a disability. At that time, there weren't sort of so much social sharing as there is today. And over the years, I felt like it was one voice telling one story, and we needed lots of voices telling lots of stories because people have such varying needs. And one
Mhm.
wheelchair's needs are so different to somebody else's. And we have people with dietary needs and people who are immune compromised, and we have people who have neurological or invisible disabilities. So we really needed a magazine that could give many voices a platform to share their stories. And that was basically how Travel Without Limits um, became the magazine. So that was launched in 2019. And the idea of that is to really give people with lived experience a place to share their stories, because there's no greater authority than somebody who at least shares something similar with other people. So, as I said, I used to work in the travel industry, always had a passion to take my son traveling. But once a wheelchair became part of our travels, it seemed extra complicated. And I won't lie, to this day, it still is a little complicated just because of the lack of information that's out there often. And I'm sure many of you also find that the information you want that's specific to your needs is often not there. So that's me and my dad, the one that now he lives with an invisible disability. He has dementia. And I guess that has also made me quite conscious of the extra challenges people do have when they have an invisible disability or a condition that's just not immediately obvious. But our belief is that just because of challenges, we should not give up our dream to travel. So it just might mean that it needs to be a little different. So when that's Braden, my son, was born with a disability, I guess our whole world was centered around therapy. And I think we became quite conscious that early intervention was the way to go. And I'm sure even if you have not had this particular situation, you realize that when you do have a medical condition, there's a very big focus on that one thing in your life. So I think that affects sort of your mental health as well. If there's just so much focus on one thing, most people like to have something to look forward to in life. And for many, it's travel. And what we think is that if it affects one person in the family, it tends to affect everyone. So if we can't do things or if my son can't do things, it means that we tend not to do them. My daughter didn't get to do them. So although the thought of traveling with Braden often seems overwhelming, we realized that it was really a time for us to connect as a family, and especially my husband and myself, it was a time for us to go from being carers and administrators and therapists and everything else to just being parents again. So for us, travel's really provided valuable connection. In the early days, the back carrier allowed us to do everything with Braden, and we could pretty much do what every other family did. But when Braden turned 7, my husband thought he was getting a bit too heavy for the back carrier, and it was time to hang that up. And by then, my daughter came along. So the back carrier days were pretty good. We could pretty much give Braden every experience. So the number one tip that I have for everyone is to always start local. If you're new to traveling with a condition, with a disability, whatever it is, start somewhere where you can just kind of get your feel for it. We always think that a staycation can be a great way to work out what you actually need out of a holiday, what your priorities are. And for us, it might be that we pay more for accommodation so we can just wheel out the door, so we don't have to get Braden in and out of a car and the wheelchair in and out of a car. So it's just working out what for you personally is important. For some people, it might be being in a bigger city where medical attention is quite close by. So we've just travelled to Western Australia, as I mentioned, when my son was in Western Australia. He, for some reason, I don't know whether he dreamt he was walking or what it was, but he got out of bed, landed on his head, ended up with a concussion. We ended up in hospital. It was really reassuring to have that medical attention nearby. We then we waited around after he'd had his observation. We spent a couple of hours in the town to make sure we felt he was okay. We then travelled to quite a remote area in Western Australia. And that night he started vomiting and we realised he had concussion. So Braden's non-verbal. It's very hard for him to express how he feels. So we just worked on all the visual signs. When we got to that remote area, medical attention was not close by and there was no hospital. There was no ambulance. It was just like a volunteer St. John's service. And that was quite scary. So I can imagine for somebody who has a condition where they may need to be near a medical facility, that could be something that would be really important to take into consideration. What we found was with each successful trip, it built our confidence. And that's why I always suggest starting local, because you don't want to start further away and it not go well, and then you lose your confidence to give it another go. So we think that as you learn, that confidence comes and everything becomes more second nature. I guess it's like any skill. I think travel is actually a skill, particularly if you have any extra needs, and you learn what the airline protocol is. You learn how to research a trip, you know where to find information. And I think the number one thing is to learn to be confident in asking for what you want and not being afraid to, or not feeling like any question is too silly. I think that's really important, because to you, if that makes a difference for a successful holiday, that's a really important question to ask, and you deserve to get the answers for it. So for us, the challenges are travelling with equipment, medical supplies, but it's important to know that the airlines do recognise the fact that some people do travel with extra equipment, whether that's continence supplies, whether it's feeding, whether it's medical supplies. Some people have catheters, all different kinds of things. So on our recent trip, we had our normal luggage allowance, then we had the wheelchair as an extra piece of mobility equipment, and then my son travels with a portable commode in another bag, and all of that was accepted as acceptable luggage. So again, just communicating it to the airline before you get to the check-in counter is really good to have it in there. But again, we always find lack of information is a problem. And for anyone with a mobility challenge, they'll know that those airline travel, like the airline bathrooms, are a huge issue because they're so tiny. This one, for any Aussies that are following along, there are some great discounts. And so I'm going to quickly mention this. I wasn't sure how many Aussies, and it won't obviously apply to overseas travellers, but there are some really good discounts that you can take advantage of, which make it easier to travel. So Virgin Australia Airlines offer for domestic travel 50% off for a carer or a companion. So if you are not able to travel by yourself, so if you are like my son Braden, then your carer or companion get 50% off that airfare, but you do need to book it directly with the airline through a special number. And Qantas do a similar thing, but that you do need to get a specific card. But I won't go into it too much because I'm conscious that the majority of your people are not from Australia. I'd also say that there's a companion card in Australia, Australian companion card, which gives my son, for example, he has a companion card. It recognises the fact that he can't go to the movies or he can't go to a show by himself. It gives a free ticket to the carer or companion that's travelling with him. So if I go with him, I'm free. If a support worker goes with him, they're free. So that's really good for any Aussies that are out there. And I would say that when we travelled overseas, we just sent emails and asked. We asked if there was any kind of discount for somebody with a disability needing carer. And we found in the US that that was quite often a yes. But we then travelled with that email that said yes with us to the ticket counter, because obviously it's not as common in other countries to offer the carer companion freebie. In Europe, it is, though. So for any of you travelling to Europe, a lot of places like Colosseum and places like that will offer a free ticket to carer or companion. So it's just, I think there's a lot of extra costs associated with traveling with a disability. So it's good to take advantage of the cheaper or discounts when you can. I've touched on this already. Communication is key. Don't ever expect that people know what you need, they might think they know what you need because they've dealt with somebody with a similar condition or with a similar disability. It's really important to remember to really articulate what you need. Speak to others. I'm sure now a lot of people are connected by Facebook groups and those sorts of places. I have quite a few groups, and the questions that come in are always answered by others. And I think there's nothing better than your peer group helping you with those answers. Airline travel, if you have any needs, whether it's dietary, whether it's mobility, whatever it is, sensory, anything, speak to the airline's special handling line. All the airlines have a handling line where they deal with passengers who have specific needs. If you're traveling with equipment, if you're traveling with something like a wheelchair or oxygen or any of those sorts of things, make sure you have all the details about that. We've traveled with things like dry ice, and that's required specific paperwork from airlines. But just have the dimensions, the weight, everything. It'll save you an extra phone call. If you have any condition or disability where extra legroom makes a difference, consider paying the extra for extra legroom seats. We find it makes a huge difference to assisting our son. It makes a big difference to his comfort. It's unfortunate that we now have to pay for all these things, but I do feel like it's worthwhile. For anyone that has any sort of physical needs, you can take harnesses and certain car seats depending on the age of the person onto the aircraft. But again, speak to the aircraft. Cruising is quite popular. I'm not sure how popular it is in your community. Maybe you can tell me, Charmaine, is it something that people are embracing or not? Because of, I mean, for people who are immune compromised, I would think that it might not be something.
No, yeah, the immune compromise since COVID, I think, has really limited cruising. But we do have a friend with osteogenesis imperfecta, and they cruise a lot because it's easy. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say I recently did a tour above and below the wing with United Airlines, and they were telling me about their HEPA filters and everything on the aircraft. And I have to say, I was quite reassured that as far as aircraft travel and the spread of, which I'm sure I'm telling you everything you already know, but I was just very interested to hear from them about the different things they've put in place to make sure that there's less spread of germs. Not sure whether it's the same in cruising though, but it's very popular with my readership because they only have to unpack once. Everything's in one spot. I'd say for anyone with mobility restriction that's wanting the accessible cabins, these tend to book out a year in advance. So they need to be booked quite a long time away, but they certainly cater quite well to people with dietary needs as well, which is really good. So cruising is super popular for many reasons, I think. And also you're not restricted with the equipment that you can take, because most ships will allow you to take even things like, I've had people have like the electric beds, the height adjustable beds switched out for the beds on the cruise ship and things like that. So they seem to be quite flexible. I would say with airports, and it depends on the airport, of course, but I've done quite a few airport lounge reviews. I would say that for anyone with sensory challenges or anyone that's wanting to distance a bit more, the airport lounges are quite good, and they also offer good shower facilities. They seem to be very clean, as in cleaned after every use, which is really good. So certainly the ones in the US are massive, and they do have areas that are less popular and easier to sort of distance yourself from other people, which I think is good. So you can pay, there's something called, I think it's called Lounge Buddy. And so they're smaller lounges. So if you don't travel often, you can just buy a one-off lounge pass. Or sometimes people with their credit cards, if they sign up to a credit card, they might get X number of lounge passes to say the Amex Lounge or something. If people travel, I've got one reader who travels quite a lot, and she pays the annual fee for the Qantas Club Lounge because she has sensory challenges and she just finds it's a much better environment for her.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of my travelers don't like to travel through airlines, through airports like Dubai, because they find that they're not very good with people with disabilities. So
Okay.
in Australia particularly, I have quite a lot of people flying through Perth now, because it's all Australian ground handlers, and everything's familiar. They know the system, that kind of thing. So Perth's become a really popular hub. So people can travel, say, from the East Coast, Sydney, Perth, have a couple of nights there or a night there, and then travel on from Perth. So yeah, it's becoming popular for that reason. Or places like Singapore are quite good for people with disabilities. It's just, I guess, some cultures are less au fait with in sometimes it's respectfully dealing with people with disability or just understanding their needs. So something to keep in mind where you transit through, I guess, in the world. I have found, I review a lot of hotels. That's very popular on my website, from youth hostels to holiday parks to five-star hotels. I found they all offer good, accessible accommodation. In fact, there's one holiday park in Australia that I would say is the best mainstream accessible accommodation I have seen, with the features that they offer. So I think that people often tell me that they have to pay for five-star accommodation to get accessible accommodation, but I would challenge that. So this is a bathroom in Arizona. This is a pretty standard kind of setup for an accessible bathroom, if people haven't seen what the accessible bathrooms are like. This is one of the holiday parks I was talking about. So they provide pool access with a ramp into the pool and a water wheelchair, which is becoming quite popular, which is fantastic. It's just nice to have all those facilities on site. I know in the US, all the hotels through the ADA have to have pool access and spa access, but that's not the case in Australia. We're very slow in that regard. So it's now becoming a little bit more popular. The hotel I stayed at in Perth had pool access. Another one I stayed at Monkey Mire had pool access, but it's not common in Australia to find that. Airbnb, one of my friends from the UK was heading up the Airbnb access and putting filters and things on that, and they've definitely improved their facilities. It can be quite a good way. I know when COVID was rampant, we did a lot of Airbnb stays because we felt that we were less likely to be subjecting our son to germs and other people. We didn't have to share lifts with him or elevators with other people, and we weren't sort of in massive common areas. So we found Airbnb is quite a good way to go, and it's just a matter of finding what you need in an Airbnb. So the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Program started in the UK. It's now very popular in Australia. I've seen it in US airports, so I think stay tuned. It's not far off. Like, I think it's spreading really well, which is great. So I'm seeing more people wearing the lanyards now. I'm seeing more staff at airports wearing the little badges that says they've done the training, which is fantastic. So basically, the Sunflower Program recognises that not all disabilities are visible, and there is very good training happening at airports, shopping centres. This sign is actually at a Sydney shopping centre. Very good training for staff now on the fact that not all disabilities are visible, and people might have needs. If they're wearing a lanyard, It's just a sign that they may need extra time, they may need extra assistance. And places like security in Australia, for example, it will have the mobility, like the wheelchair symbol, then it will have the sunflower symbol underneath. And it will mean that somebody that's wearing one of those lanyards can also go through the fast track at the security, because there's a recognition that they may not, for some reason, be able to stand in that queue. So it's definitely something to look out for, and I'm sure it would help a lot of people who may have a condition where they can't stand in queues or can't tolerate queues, as well as just getting that extra time and assistance when going through somewhere like security. Not everyone's comfortable wearing the lanyard or badge. I would say communicate your needs, if not to a staff member. But it's definitely becoming well recognised in Australia. I briefly wanted to touch on this. I know this is not worldwide at the moment, but this is a Changing Places bathroom. It offers an adult-sized change table and other facilities. They're becoming more commonplace in airports in Australia. They offer a height adjustable adult-sized change table. They offer a hoist, so somebody who needs a hoist to either get onto the table or use the toilet can use the hoist in these facilities. Everything is lowered in there, so all the access points, the lights, everything else. There's usually a privacy screen in there, so if somebody with a disability needs assistance from somebody else to go to the toilet, they can pull the privacy screen across, still have the security of having somebody in the room with them. So the US is rolling these out. Singapore, I think, has got them as well. Japan has got a couple. The problem with the implementation in other countries tends to be that they're not putting in the hoist. I imagine in the US it's because of litigation. If somebody doesn't use the hoist correctly, but it virtually renders the adult size change table pretty useless for anyone that actually needs to be lifted onto it, because without a hoist, somebody is risking their health and well-being lifting that person onto it. But for anyone traveling into Australia, know that it is available, which is great, because most of us, last thing we do before we get on a plane is go to the bathroom, and the first thing we do when we arrive, if we haven't been on the toilet in the bathroom on the aircraft, is to go to the toilet. So no reason that people that can't access the bathrooms on the plane don't have a facility to go to. I think sometimes the success of a holiday comes from really working out what you want out of the holiday. So what's your priorities and where you might find it. So for us, we look for a destination that offers us a variety of accessible activities, because my daughter doesn't like the same things as my son. We look at places where we can all participate in activities together. We also look for the availability of equipment. So whether this is a trail rider, which actually came to Australia from Canada because of an Australian who went to Canada and learned about the trail rider and sort of got on a campaign to bring them here. Beach wheelchairs. There's some incredible experiences in New Zealand. This was Braden on top of a glacier. We flew in a helicopter to the top of the glacier, and then he was able to sit ski because somebody with a disability in New Zealand had advocated for this. I guess it's like an adapted sit ski that would satisfy the helicopter's weight limits and everything else to go with the helicopter. We also find some destinations offer more of an inclusive experience than others. So say, for example, the US has got the ramps and all the ADA sort of, I guess, requirements in place. And we do find that people are more aware of disability. But we also found that in Fiji, for instance, they don't believe in anyone should miss out. So Braden was able to do far more experiences in Fiji because I guess there weren't the same rules around litigation or OH&S and things like that. So we were still confident he was safe, and the operators were definitely keen to make sure he was safe, but we were able to strap him onto the back of a quad bike. He was able to do this electric bike experience with a few adaptations. So they built a little stool so he could have that under his feet and he could be safe on the back of the bike, and put some bungee cords across that. So we could do that together. So it's not always about sort of it being fully accessible for us, but we do have the advantage that Braden is able to transfer out of his wheelchair. Being inventive and asking questions and persistence often helps make things happen for us. So for us, it was once we'd done that quad biking experience in Fiji, we went to this company in Australia and said, is there any chance our son could do it here? And they said, well, how would he sit and what would he do? And we said, we'll bring some non-slip matting. We'll bring a belt that we can put around him, and we'd love to do it as a family. And they said, well, we'll check and see if we think he's safe. And if he is, he can do it. So he got to ride the sand dunes of Port Stephens on the back, which is not far from Newcastle, Charmaine, on the back of the bike, and we could all do it together, which was fantastic. So it's also going to people with a solution to what the problem they're going to raise is, and sort of confidently telling them. For us, I often say taking charge of a situation is quite good. So whether you have food intolerance or a condition that means that you're immune suppressed or whatever it is, I think sometimes taking charge, which I know when you've already got a lot on, is really hard to do. But for us, because of Braden's physical needs, it might have been something like suggesting a playground that was accessible, that had accessible equipment for him, and to make sure that he wasn't going to be miss out. So instead of, if we were going with a group of friends to a park, letting somebody else dictate where we go, it'd be us suggesting, what about this park because it's accessible? And we knew that there'd be an accessible bathroom, accessible play equipment, and he'd be able to do it. So similar if you're going to a festival or a beach or whatever, or if somebody suggests a get together and it doesn't suit you because it's in a confined space, what about suggesting somewhere else, which you're probably all really good at doing anyway. I'm probably telling you something you already know, but I just think that it's having the confidence to take charge of situations can often help. So for us, travel's about making memories. It's really about filling Braden's cup full of as many adventures as we can, because I think we're very conscious of the fact that other people won't do the things that we're prepared to do, and rightly so. I mean, the picture of him on the luge with my husband up in the top corner, you know, we bumped a wheelchair upstairs and we, you know, did all sorts of things to make that happen for Braden to do that. And I don't expect other people to do it, but we just want him to have, you know, really full life and not to miss out on things. This is us doing, Braden can't snorkel, but we have the opportunity to do like a guided snorkel in a living reef up in Daydream Island in Queensland. And so although he couldn't put his head underwater, he still got to see the stingrays. We all got to go in as a family. So it's just adapting it. Another time we did a helicopter trip over the reef so he could still see it, even though he couldn't snorkel and be a part of it. So it's just adapting, I guess. And I'd also say experiences don't have to be big, because it's just about sharing the experience. So my daughter used to do ice skating when she was younger. Braden used to watch her do her lessons every week. We asked if he could go on the ice in his wheelchair. He thought that was just fantastic. Finding an accessible putt or mini golf. So my top tips: start small, research, plan, ask questions, ask more questions, use all your resources around you, or your friendship groups or your Facebook groups, anywhere else you can. Use the concessions and facilities available to make it easier for you. Don't expect every minute to look like a Hallmark movie, because I can tell you our travels do not look like a Hallmark movie. People see the highlight reel, and I think that's the problem on social media now. We're constantly seeing all these fabulous photos of people, and we don't realize how much time and effort and everything else goes into their, you know, travels. So have lots of information on both websites. If you're looking for information, Travel Without Limits is probably a broader spectrum of information. So we cover, you know, all ranges of abilities and disabilities and needs. Have Wheelchair Will Travel is definitely much more our family in a blog format, but also a lot of hotel reviews and things like that. So lots of photos, videos. We really believe in giving people information, because information is power. You can then make the decisions whether something suits your needs or doesn't suit your needs. And I think that's when I do panel sessions, it's the one thing that I tell any business is to just provide the information, and then people can make the decision whether it's right for them or not.